Reasonable Boy podcast. This is podcast number 004, the Boris Broadcasting Corporation. Not many people have noticed, but you wouldn't think so by the amount of activity on Twitter in the past few days. At the leadership debate last Friday on the BBC Question Time, Boris Johnson was the last person to speak, and what happened was that the first question was asked, as a lady in the audience said, "Can we trust you?" And there was an awful lot of laughter about this, and then clapping, and that was fine. And he went on and answered the questions, and when it was finished, the BBC included that clip in the news programme, but minus the laughing. They had edited out that laughing part just so that they could have the clapping part. So there, once again, we've seen the BBC editing in favour of Boris Johnson and the government. Now, under their charter, the BBC in elections has to be unbiased. And if something happens, whether it's the Conservative leader, the Labour leader, the Lib Dems, the SNP, whoever it may be, if they make a mistake or they say something which is contentious, then it should be shown. It shouldn't be edited out. If the reaction of any of these people has been good or bad or indifferent, it should be shown. And it's not the BBC who should have the final say on how they interpret it. It should be straightforward. This is the recording, this is what happened, and this is what we're going to show, especially in the elections. And we've seen numerous complaints via Twitter about this. We've had ex-BBC journalists on Twitter complain and say this is disgraceful. The BBC is actually not making a good case for itself to survive. And I don't think whoever wins the next election, I do believe that there'll be an awful lot of scratching of heads, and maybe a lot of people in higher places at the BBC scared of what's going to happen. And I think the time has come now that we have to do something about the BBC's news and current affairs programmes. And I honestly believe that the only way out of this would be to actually start afresh. So everybody gets the P45s, no exclusions, whoever there may be. I don't care if it's it's somebody high up in the BBC or it's a news presenter that we've known for quite some time. Don't care about that. They should all be given the P45s, and the news and current affairs programming unit needs to be built back up from scratch, and built back up in a way in which is embedded into the BBC, into its culture, into its ethos, that it's unbiased. If you've got a contentious issue, and news is like that, then by all means report, but then give the other side. Don't just give one biased opinion because it favours your political view, or you favour a certain group, or you're close to, say, some businesses or something that have interests in a country, and you want to give the best slant for those people that you are employed by, because some of these BBC reporters are not just employed by the BBC, they're employed by other people as well. They take gigs from other organisations, and some of these organisations mean that there's a conflict of interest between the presenter and the organisation, and so that shouldn't be allowed. If you're a reporter at the BBC, that's all you should do. You shouldn't be available for hire anywhere else. And this is the thing that I think has eroded the trust between the public and the BBC, is that some of these reporters, so-called reporters, or journalists, like to be called, don't just present the unbiased view of the information that we need to see or hear, that actually, because of their links with other organisations, how can we trust them, for instance, if they're doing something on the environment and they have links to a fracking company, for instance? So how can you trust that reporter to actually talk about the environment or the impacts of fracking on the environment if they're also doing work for a fracking company? Now, I don't know who that reporter is or if it exists, but it's just an example. And so what you're going to hear now is the unedited portion of the question to Boris Johnson about his trustworthiness. And then we'll come back a little bit later and discuss that.
I'd just like to ask you, how important is it for someone in your position of power to always tell the truth?
I think it's absolutely vital. And I think it's absolutely vital, and I think that the issue of trust in politics is central to this election and fundamental to the corrosion of trust in politics at the moment.
So why do you think you're being asked that question?
Well, that was interesting, wasn't it? There you have the Prime Minister of the United Kingdom there being held to account by a member of the audience on question time. And this is very unusual because usually question time, the audience is vetted. And it has been becoming patently obvious over the past couple of years or more that the audience is being more and more right-wing, and left-wing and centrist voices have not been able to make their voices heard at these question time recordings. And here we have basically they didn't have time to vet people, so they probably got a more natural audience representation than they would have normally. And so you've got the Prime Minister, Boris Johnson, there, totally wrong-footed by that question. And it's a question we all need to ask as to why the BBC edited that laughter out of the clip that they played in the BBC News segment. It is something that goes to the core of a democracy. Now, I am on the left. I support the Labour Party. But I want to see the BBC being totally unbiased, give me the information that I need, and I can make my own mind up about what I want to believe and what I don't want to believe. And as the example I gave before about the environment, if you say to me this what's happening today, the floods, is a consequence of global warming, and you give me the evidence to show that that is the case, fine. But also, you must give me the opposite side of the view in saying, well, most of the scientific community thinks this, but there's a small group of scientists that think this, and you explain why they think that. That gives me, so well, I would say I do believe in global warming. So, that's just me. But at least you've given me 2 points of view there. And I think this is the problem that they've got now is that they've got this in such a situation now that nobody trusts the BBC. Now, do you think about that? I always remember the BBC growing up in the 60s, and it was the trusted source of your information. BBC News and Current Affairs on the radio and on the TV. If they said something was happening, it was happening. And I think now it's been politicised more since 2010 when David Cameron actually appointed political appointees to the BBC. And since then it has been really it's not even fought really to keep itself independent and free of bias. I think now we're talking about the end of news and current affairs at the BBC. And you may think, well, this is just one clip. Well, it's one clip of many. And I think we've now come to the point where that section of the BBC News and Current Affairs is untenable. And the only way we're going to get this sorted is to not tinker around the edges. Tony Hall, chairman of the BBC, needs to get a wiggle on, and he needs to go into the heads of news and current affairs and sack a lot of them. All the heads of news and current affairs, all the producers, sack the lot and start afresh. And then start on the reporter, the journalists. Because there's some really biased journalists at the BBC, and they don't hide it now. And it'd be uncomfortable for people to hear this, but certainly Laura Kuenssberg is one of them. And it's awful really thinking about when you say a woman of her sort of intellect really is getting to the point where no one believes a word she says. And it's not just a case of, John Humphreys has just recently retired from the BBC. Nobody trusted him. So it's not just men, it's not just a female reporter. It is a bunch of reporters within the BBC that are so wound up in this Westminster bubble that they're just being fed information. And instead of saying, I'm a journalist, I need to corroborate this, I need to know why is this party saying this to me? Let's go out and find out. No, it's we've got a press release from the Conservative Party. Oh, I'll just read that out. No questioning. And that's the thing. I don't care who you vote for. I don't care about the political views of those political journalists. Even I want them as my representative to the powerful people to say, hang on a minute, you said this 6 months ago, now you're saying this, why have you changed your mind? You've made a statement there and it's wrong. And challenge them. And if you challenge somebody that I normally vote for, but you challenge them in a fair way and say, look, you've said this, and now you're saying that, what's it changed? Or you caught them out on something, that's fine. I may not like it as it's my political party, but I have more respect for you, so long as you do it for everyone. And I think, unfortunately, this is just another example, unfortunately, on the BBC of this once proud organisation going down to the dregs of Fox News. And Fox News in America used to run a strapline sort of thing on their break saying Fox News, fair and balanced. And if you've got to say fair and balanced in between segments, you're in a very sticky place, because it should be taken for granted that you'll be fair and balanced. And the BBC are heading down to Fox News territory. And nobody in this country really wants to see them do that. And you've got to make up your own mind now as to what you trust and who you trust. And unfortunately, we can't trust the BBC anymore. And that's very sad. Thanks for listening, and there'll be another podcast very soon. Cheers. Bye.